The most tragic announcement that was made at my high school was not even an announcement. It was the most horrible form of gossip that happened in class, unintentionally. The teacher hadn't arrived yet, and everyone was seated, chatting. I heard a group to my left talking about a boy at a nearby school who had taken his own life the night before. A blonde boy, 2 years younger. They started talking about his sister, our age, and I remember the most horrible sensation, like a rising sickness creeping all over me. They shared the gory details and hushed whispers, horrified yet loving the gruesome darkness of it all. How he'd waited till he was alone and done it in the garage. What he looked like when they cut him down. I felt my heart beating so hard that I felt sick. So sick I wanted to vomit on my desk, but I couldn't move. All I could do was listen. The girl in front of me suddenly turned around, and I still remember her face, white as a ghost. She said my name and then, "No, oh no." The group gossiping said my cousin's name, just as the teacher entered. I felt like a ghost, suspended in that horrible second where I heard his name, and I couldn't pretend my mind didn't work. The girl in front of me kept turning to ask if I was okay, but I couldn't look at her. The teacher hated me, and I couldn't ask to leave because I couldn't explain. For 40 minutes, I sat there, and everyone's voices felt like they were in a wind tunnel. All I could really hear was my breathing, hard and fast. Dead, dead, dead. I was stuck. The moment class ended, I bolted, leaving books in my bag, walking straight to the office. There wasn't any air. It felt like I was crossing a desert. The school was deserted, everyone was in class. It made the moment more surreal, like being inside a dream. My dad was home that day, and all I could think was that I needed to reach my dad. The world had shrunk to a single mission. "Please ring my dad, I need to go home." I told the office staff through the window. They kept talking to me, but I couldn't understand their words. "Please ring my dad, I need to go home." I said these words over and over. Finally, one asked if I was sick. I felt sick with relief that I now had an excuse. "Yes, I am sick." I went and sat in a chair, no longer able to stand. The office ladies asked how I was sick and what was wrong, but I was unable to tell them. I was caught, unable to explain, but unable to leave. And in my mind, all the time, he was swinging. Luckily, at this point, my year coordinator came running in. Turns out, the girl in my class had run straight to his office to tell him what happened. He made the office ladies ring my dad and held my hand while I waited. I remember that he had tears in his eyes. I was always so grateful that he was there as a buffer, but I couldn't speak because I couldn't understand his words. I remember that his voice kept breaking. I've never heard him sound anything but confident. I kept thinking about the rope swinging, about how we'd spent so many years there playing, and he went there to end himself. Our house was so close, but he did that. The office was so still. The office ladies were staring at me as if I was the one now passing. I remember clenching my hands in the pockets of my jeans, how my head felt like there was no blood in it. I thought about my other cousin, her parents, and then I couldn't think about them because he wasn't allowed, and I was sitting there, just waiting. We didn't live far from school, so my dad arrived soon. There were no words for the relief of seeing his gentle face. He asked if I was sick, and I simply told him I had to go home. Everyone was silent, watching us leave. I got in the car. Instead of starting the vehicle, my dad turned to me and said, "Please tell me what's wrong." And in that moment, I suddenly realized I was going to have to tell him about the ending. In this entire window of time, this thought had not occurred to me, and the thought of saying it out loud, of destroying another person like I had been destroyed, felt so much worse than learning the truth. I wanted to get out of the car, but there was nowhere else to go. I had nowhere to run, and I couldn't move anyway. And then I realized that it wouldn't end, that we would have to tell my brother, who was home sick, and then my mother, and I did not want to do it. I did not want to start that chain. So I sat there, frozen and lost, surrounded by a death that was still a secret. I remember my dad's words returning to a different kind of alarm, lacing his words as I finally met his gaze. I looked away, staring at the plants surrounding the school, and jumped. I yelled it like a scream that became a song, and for the first time in my life, I saw my father's heartbreak. He made a noise I will never forget, and then he began to sob. I had never seen him cry before. We sat there in the car park, sobbing, until students walked by and stared at us. I felt like we belonged to another world because they looked so alien, so calm. I grabbed my dad's arm and said, "Please, please, Dad, take me home." We drove home in silence, the only sound being our sniffles and sobs. I couldn't look at my dad, couldn't bear to see his pain. I felt guilty for being the one to tell him, for being the one to break the news. When we got home, my brother was sitting on the couch, watching TV. My dad went to him, and I couldn't watch. I went to my room, locked the door, and collapsed on my bed. I couldn't cry anymore. I was empty. The rest of the day was a blur. I remember my mom coming home, and the sound of her screams. I remember the funeral, the feeling of being trapped in a nightmare. I remember the days that followed, the feeling of being lost and alone. But most of all, I remember the sound of my dad's sobs, the sound of his heart breaking. It's a sound that I will never forget, a sound that will haunt me for the rest of my life. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months. The pain never subsided, but it became a constant ache that I learned to live with. My family and I went through the motions of grief, trying to find a new normal. But nothing was normal anymore. Everything reminded me of him, of what he had done, of what I had lost. I started to withdraw from my friends, from my family. I couldn't bear to be around people who didn't understand what I was going through. I felt like I was drowning in my own sorrow, and I didn't know how to keep my head above water. My parents tried to get me to talk to someone, to seek help, but I refused. I didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to relive the pain. I just wanted to be left alone. But one day, something changed. I was sitting in my room, staring blankly at the wall, when I saw a piece of paper on my desk. It was a note, written in his handwriting. I hadn't seen it before, hadn't noticed it in the chaos of the past few months. I picked it up, and my heart stopped. It was a letter, addressed to me. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should read it, but something compelled me to open it, to see what he had written. The words blurred together on the page as I read, tears streaming down my face. He had written about his struggles, about his pain. He had written about how much he loved me, how much he was sorry for leaving me behind. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders as I read the words. For the first time since his death, I felt a sense of peace. I realized that he wasn't gone, not really. He was still with me in my heart, in my memories. I folded the letter and placed it in my pocket. I knew that I would carry it with me always, a reminder of what I had lost, but also of what I still had. I took a deep breath and walked out of my room, determined to face the world again. I went downstairs, where my family was waiting for me. They looked up at me with hopeful eyes, and I knew that they had been waiting for me to come back to them. I sat down with them, and we talked for hours. We talked about him, about our memories of him, about our grief. We cried together, and we laughed together. For the first time in months, I felt like I was part of a family again. Over the next few weeks, I started to rebuild my life. I went back to school, started seeing my friends again. I even started to smile again, to laugh again. But I never forgot him. I never forgot the pain he had caused me, the pain he had endured. I never forgot the letter he had written me, the words that had changed my life. I kept the letter with me always, a reminder of what I had been through, of what I had survived. And I knew that no matter what lay ahead, I would face it with courage, with strength, because I had been through the worst, and I had come out the other side. Years went by, and I grew into a strong, capable person. I made new friends, built a new life, but I never forgot him, never forgot the lessons he had taught me, and I knew that I would always carry him with me, in my heart, in my memories. The pain of his loss never went away, but it became a dull ache, a reminder of what I had loved and lost. And I knew that I would always cherish that love, that loss, because it had made me who I was today. I look back on that time with a sense of sadness, but also with a sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the time I had with him, for the lessons he had taught me. Gratitude for the strength I had found within myself, for the courage I had discovered. And I knew that I would always carry that gratitude with me, would always remember the boy who had changed my life forever. As I grew older, I began to realize that his death had taught me something profound. It had taught me that life is precious, that every moment counts. It had taught me to cherish the people I love, to never take them for granted. I began to live my life with a sense of purpose, with a sense of passion. I pursued my dreams. I took risks. I loved with all my heart. And I knew that he was with me every step of the way. I could feel his presence, his guidance. I knew that he was proud of me, proud of the person I had become. Years turned into decades, and I grew into a wise, compassionate person. I had lived a full life, a life filled with love, laughter, and tears. And I knew that I had him to thank for it. One day, as I was sitting on my porch, watching the sunset, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I knew that he was still with me, still guiding me. And I smiled, knowing that I would always carry him in my heart, would always cherish the memories we had made together. The story of my life, of our lives, was one of tragedy, but also of triumph. It was a story of love, of loss, of laughter, and of tears. And I knew that it would always be a part of me, a part of who I am. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth of the setting sun on my face. I knew that he was with me, always, and that I would always carry him in my heart. And with that thought, I let out a sigh of contentment, knowing that I had lived a life worth living, a life filled with love, laughter, and tears.